welcome back to Vinyl Friday, where I go through my records in alphabetical order like a big nerd and talk about why I love them. I am so excited about today's episode because not only are we going to be covering an album that has been ranked the greatest of all time by the New Musical Express and Rolling Stone, we're going to be focusing on a song that I love deeply. And why has it been ranked as the greatest album of all time? Well, because it's a brilliantly conceived, free-flowing, groundbreaking, jazzy, psychedelic soul song cycle, and it sounds like this. It's What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Just a quick warning, there are mentions of suicide in this episode. If that's something you don't feel like listening to, just skip everything between this time and this time. I'll include it in the chapters as well so you can navigate easily. There's much to love in this song, and in a lot of ways it's a song that tells its own story. So what we're going to do with this episode is start at the top and just work our way through. How does that sound? First though, some background. Prior to this album, Marvin Gaye was merely a massively successful pop singer for Motown Records, providing them with hits like this. And this goodie. By 1970 though, poor Marvin was severely depressed. His singing partner, Tammy Terrell, the other half of this song, had very tragically died of a brain tumor at a very young age. What age was that, you ask? Editor Nancy, how old was she?
She was 24 years old.
There you go, young. He was becoming increasingly dependent on cocaine. He was having issues with the IRS. Possibly as a result of all of these things, his marriage was failing, and he actually attempted suicide, but was stopped by head of Motown himself and father-in-law, Berry Gordy. Marvin was also besieged by the many difficult situations that the country was facing. He was deeply impacted by the Watts riots of 1965, which he said were a real turning point in his attitude politically. He said, "With the world exploding around me, how am I supposed to keep singing love songs? It's pouring with rain." In addition to all of that, his brother was fighting in Vietnam, and when he came back home and told Marvin about it, again, Marvin was obviously really upset about it. One night after they had a long conversation about it, Marvin told his brother, "I didn't know how to fight before, but now I think I do. I just have to do it my way. I'm not a painter, I'm not a poet, but I can do it with music." I'm just gonna jump on a soapbox for a quick minute. This is a really valid point that Marvin is making. There are many ways to be a part of a movement. I used to have a really hard time with it because with movements that I wanted to be involved in, I felt like I had to be an activist and I needed to be actively influencing people and really like taking action. It's just not my strong suit. And I became very depressed because I felt like I wasn't effective enough. I'm in the middle of a story. A heartfelt story at that. I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't helping enough. Seriously. As I've gotten older, it's occurred to me that there are many ways... Come on, sit in my lap. It's occurred to me, as I've gotten older, that there are many ways to participate in any kind of movement. And while I may not be a great activist, I like talking to people on the internet about music, and I feel like I'm alright at making music for people to listen to, and also I make these very encouraging dinosaur collages. And while that might not seem like it has anything to do with any movements, I think that the people who are living and breathing it and trying to raise awareness and marching in the streets, sometimes they just need something nice or something beautiful or something enjoyable or just something different to take a break from it all. So if that's you, or if you're just anyone who's feeling a little besieged by the world at the moment, here's a dinosaur to make you feel better. Right, back to the song. While this is all happening, Obie Benson of the Four Tops was on tour with his band, and his tour bus passed by a protest that was happening in Berkeley in People's Park, in which the police were brutalizing the protesters. Benson said about this, "I saw this and started wondering what was going on. What is happening here? One question led to another. Why are they sending kids far away from their families overseas? Why are they attacking their own kids in the street?" He went back to Detroit and started writing a song to that effect, which he then presented to Marvin Gaye. Marvin didn't want to do it initially, but was talked into it. He made some adjustments to the melody, added some more personal lyrics, added some compositional elements, and they took it into the recording studio. Right, now we're ready to begin listening. Let's drop the needle from the top. We open on what sounds like a sort of party atmosphere. Marvin invited some of his friends from a football team because, and I'm not kidding, for a moment he thought about quitting music and becoming a professional football player. He had not actually played football before, and it wasn't terribly successful, but he thought he'd invite some of his football friends, plus the band and anyone else who happened to be in the studio, and they created this party atmosphere. Interesting bit of trivia, the first person who appears on this album, this person, hey, what's happening, ended up being a caterer for Bill Clinton. I think this gives the song a collective spirit, but also the sort of laid-back, cheerful tone of the beginning of the song creates a really stark contrast against the rest of the song, and I think that makes it all the more powerful. Moving on. That soprano sax part was not actually meant to be in the song. The sax player, Eli Fontaine, was sort of improvising. Marvin said, "What's that? What are you doing?" And Eli says to Marvin, he says, "I was just goofing off." To which Marvin Gaye replied, "You goof off exquisitely, thank you." And he's not wrong. That is some exquisite goofing off. It's sweet, it's soulful, which is perfect because Marvin's about to come in, and his voice can also be characterized as very sweet and very soulful. Sweet. It's not like a gutsy, gravelly voice. It's just smooth. It's just very smooth vocals. And then we've got his very personal lyrics that tell a little bit of that story that we were just talking about before. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you now. It's really unusual on a Motown single at this point in time for the singer to be outright denouncing the Vietnam War. But, you know, I said at the outset, this is groundbreaking. New lighting! There's a bit of a storm brewing outside, so it's raining and then it's light and then it's raining and then it's light. Personally, it's very enjoyable, but from a lighting perspective, it's a bit of a disaster. We thank you for your understanding. And the next thing I want to point out with this very beginning part of the song is this little bass lick here. Bum, 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 bum. That is the legendary James Jamerson on bass. And on this track, he's playing what is one of my all-time favorite bass lines. I could rave about it all day, but perhaps what might be a bit more entertaining for you is if we get the bass correspondent in here to demonstrate that herself. Okay, so James Jamerson is well regarded because he is a master of feel. The groove is always exactly what the song calls for. He has a light touch, his style is sort of bouncy, bounding, and quite funky. And he uses quite a lot of ghost notes when he's playing, which is when you sort of play the string muted, like that. It adds a rhythmic element. So without ghost notes, a riff might sound like, whereas with ghost notes, it might go, it's just like da ta 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 ta. He plays a lot of in-between notes, like instead of playing, he'll play, and he plays some really beautiful syncopations as well. So instead of playing 1, 2, 3, 4, he might play 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Let's have a listen just to the first verse. I'll play along. I don't have the feel that James Jamerson has. I would wager that most bassists don't, but I'll do my best to keep up.
God, that's fun to play.
And what's more, he was completely hammered at the time of this recording. They had to drag him into the studio. He couldn't sit on his stool without falling off, so he ended up recording this entire bass line lying on his back on the floor. And here's a little bit of what it sounds like isolated. You can see he's got this incredibly sensitive feel. He's always in the pocket. He uses those ghost notes that the bass correspondent was talking about expertly, effortlessly. And he really gives you a sense of why the rhythm section isn't just for drums. Beautiful playing. We've arrived at the second verse. What I love about this verse is that a second melody line comes in, and this is another example of one of those little happy accidents that happens on this recording session. He recorded a take, he recorded another take. When he was sitting down and listening to the playback, he's asking the engineer to play back the two different vocal takes so that he can choose one or the other, and the engineer accidentally plays them through on top of each other. Marvin's like, wow, that sounds fantastic, and decides to keep it that way. I agree that that was a great decision because it means that you've got this lead melody and then you've got this, it's almost like a duet, but it's not because it's not sung in harmony. It's just like an alternate melody. I'll try and sing it, but I'm no Marvin Gaye. Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. So it does sort of harmonize in places, but it's not intentional. He was just trying out different melodies, and overlaid they sound great. I also think it's kind of haunting that this verse begins, Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. We don't need to escalate. To say that the man had a very fraught relationship with his father is a massive understatement, because his dad later shot him to death. That's about as fraught as they come. We've come to the bridge and the chorus. Don't punish me with brutality. There's that police brutality that's coming through, inspired by the People's Park protest. A thing that is really special about this bridge and this chorus is that it's a very clear example of call and response, which has a long tradition in black music. It originated in Africa. You can find it throughout many African musical traditions. So predictably, it arrived in the Americas by deeply unsavory means, to say the least. But that means that you can find this call and response tradition in the music of just about any country that was involved in the transatlantic slave trade and now has a black population, like the Dominican Republic. And Cuba. And Brazil. A lot of the Caribbean islands.
Work all night on a drink of rum. Daylight come and we want to go home.
More relevantly, you can find it throughout the United States in a number of forms of black music, including, but not limited to, field holler,
Hello, go, hello, go, hello, go,
gospel,
Oh, happy day.
instrumentally in blues where the instrument is the response rather than a voice,
Just a woman told my mother before I was born.
and the same thing for jazz, R&B,
You know you make me wanna shout, kick my heels up and down, throw my hands up and
soul,
said he's going back to mine, going back to mine. Ooh, what's left of it was
hip-hop, more contemporary rap music, etc. You get the point. So when he's got this call and response going, he's engaging in a much larger tradition of music of the African diaspora. I'm not sure if he was explicitly aware that that's what he was doing, but I think it has a degree of nobility for that nonetheless. Here's what I mean. Call, it goes from that verse, picket lines, sister, and picket signs, sister. It continues that from the bridge into the chorus. When the chorus ends, we come to this moment in the song that I think is very, very special. I'm not sure what you would call it. I'm just calling it the B part at the moment. It sounds like this. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's an unusual moment in the song because this song has already given us a verse, a bridge, and a chorus. It feels kind of complete. He could have just gone back to another verse, maybe thrown in a solo, ended on a double chorus and faded out, and it would have been just a standard pop song, and we would have been happy with that. But he gives us this extra part that makes the song very unique structurally. It's also got this very jazzy sort of scatting. So you can see. Not that kind. I find it very interesting rhythmically as well. It's got this lovely syncopation to it. His melody isn't landing on the downbeat, it's landing in between the downbeats. It's just before. Yeah, 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 yeah. Great. I think I sort of took a little of the magic out of it just then. Hopefully I made my point. But the best part about this B part is that it starts with this beautiful haunting chord. This is going to sound a little bit technical, but it's actually really straightforward, I promise. I think it sounds that haunting because there's a string melody that's happening over the top of that chord that keeps landing on the upper extensions as opposed to the sort of main notes of the chord. I'll get the piano correspondent to explain what I mean by that. Hello! This is what's meant by the upper extensions thing. This is an A minor chord. A minor. And those are the three notes that make up A minor. If you took one out, it's not really A minor anymore. But you can add things to it. It's still A minor, but it's A minor with slightly different flavors, like this. Or this. Or this. Or this. Ugh. No, we don't like that one. This? That's a good one. And those are called upper extensions, those sort of clip-on notes. What the strings are doing in this section is they're landing on these upper extension notes like this. That's an upper extension. You see what I mean? It's a little bit eerie. But then it modulates into a new chord. And it gives us this sense of uplift and hope with this lovely ascending string melody. Before it explodes forth into a triumphant verse by way of a sparkling glissando. Again, we'll get the piano correspondent to show you what I mean. So the modulating, we go from this sort of haunting, eerie, sad place to this very buoyant, hopeful place. Isn't that beautiful? And here's what the strings are doing that part. This is the ascending melody. This is a glissando. The glissando in this song happens right before the beginning of the last verse. And it's great because it sounds like it's going to come back to an E after... Sounds like it's gonna go here, but it doesn't. It goes here, and that sounds like the wrong note, but not in context. And it's even better because there's a glissando before it. We're going up. And again. Okay, we've arrived at my favorite part of the song, the final verse. I think that this verse is nothing short of ecstatic. For me, it's like a spiritual experience. I was listening to the song in the car yesterday just to get a sense of like what points I might want to make about the song. And I'm not gonna lie, I did have a little bit of a sob in traffic on my morning commute. The vocal melodies, they're soulful, they're so emotional. Obviously the foreground melody is the mother, mother. The back one though is doing this. We can do this. We are not gonna cry today. We are on camera today. It was bad enough in traffic. Oh, there are so many moments in the vocals that I love in this verse. I'm gonna point some of them out. They're so sweet. His vocals are so sweet. And then there's the strings. They are masterfully orchestrated. They have this whole counter melody that's happening in the background. What did we say about crying? We said no crying on camera. That's what we said. Okay. They pick up elements of the vocals, of the backing vocals. You know what? Let's go to the piano correspondent while I collect myself. Man, that means I've got to keep it together as well. This might be my no, I have many favorite elements of the song. Scratch that. Nothing is my favorite element. It's all my favorite element. It's fantastic. But here's what the strings are doing in the last verse. Fall in love with that. Just a beautiful piece of writing. Now I've got to collect myself. Back to you. Alright, I'm good. And then we end on that B part again. So we come off the back of that really triumphant final verse and return to this. And it alternates between the haunting part and the hopeful part. Just goes back and forth and back and forth. It never resolves and it fades out. It's such an ambiguous ending. It's like, are we gonna get our shit together or is this just gonna persist in perpetuity? So far, it looks like the latter. I mean, Smokey Robinson, who is of the opinion that this is the best album of all time as well, was right on the money when he said,
"This is prophecy, man. You listen to what's going on and what he's talking about in that record, man, is happening more now than it was then."
So then what? Marvin Gaye brings the song to Motown and Berry Gordy is like, nope, this is terrible, absolutely not, we are not releasing that. He told Marvin that it was, quote, the worst thing he'd ever heard in his life. That Dizzy Gillespie stuff in the middle, that skedding, it's old. And basically Marvin Gaye went on strike and refused to record anything else for the label until they released this song, which they did. Was Berry Gordy right in the end? No, he was completely wrong. This album sold 200,000 copies in the first week. It topped the Billboard R&B chart for 5 weeks. It reached number 2 on the main chart, and it was so successful that Marvin Gaye was told that he had a month to write the rest of an album. This is what we ended up with. Now the reason that they say it's a song cycle is that while it does have individual songs, they all sort of flow beautifully from one to the next, and they form this sort of wider, bigger picture where he gets to talk about like poverty, inner city issues. Again, in a groundbreaking way, he discusses ecology. It all works together as this single concept as opposed to an anthology of songs. It's got a great cover. It's raining. He's getting rained on. He's soaking wet. He looks miserable about it too. That's how I look when I'm getting rained on as well. It's bleak. The colors are a little bit muted. I also like that he has a beard. He grew a beard while he was in his depressive phase, which I was going to say a lot of us do, but famously I can't grow a beard.
I've just found this choice quote on the subject. I also grew a beard, which back then wasn't so common for black men. Black men weren't supposed to look overtly masculine. I'd spent my entire career looking harmless, and the look no longer fit. I wasn't harmless. I was pissed at America. It's a hell of a quote.
The last little point to note about this album is that Sly Stone put out an album later in 1971 entitled There's a Riot Going On, And that album was titled in response to What's Going On. What's going on? There's a riot going on. Right, that's it for me. If you enjoyed this episode, or you would like to support any of the things that I do, I'll leave a link in the description for my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you are welcome to make a donation, but no pressure, friends. For those of you who do choose to make a donation, here's a dinosaur for you. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend! That is the legendary James Jamerson on bass. Jeez. I cannot believe how difficult it is for me to get this lighting right today. Biscuits all over your chin, you little gremlin. You're revolting. The strings in the second half, the hopeful part of this, are going over this chord. Yeah, yeah. That's a great song. Can't wait till we get to that song. That's not the song we're doing today. My face is covered in cat hair. Ow, 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 my knees.